That tomato's starting to ripen. It looks nice. You can see my nasturtiums still no blooms. But, which is, I mean, sometimes I've had blooms a month earlier. We're still pitting cherries. We'll be doing this pretty nearly all week, I think.
What type of tomato is that on the corner there? Do you recall?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, that's the way it goes. There's a lot of varieties in this.
Yeah.
Well, two gardens really. One Victory Garden up front and one in the back.
Yep. Oh, boy, I'm tired today. Picked another.
Yeah, kind of like not the best sleep. She woke up, she said, this is what she thought it was this morning. Turns out it was just after midnight.
Well, I woke up before midnight, and
Yep.
then finally I looked at the
Yeah.
clock, and it was just after midnight, and I'm like, oh.
That's a problem.
So I went back to bed.
No, she didn't say back to sleep. Sometimes they're very different.
I don't know. I mean, usually I'm pretty good about, like, I'll wake up at 4:30 and that's that, right? But then sometimes my brain does some weird thing and it tells me, oh, it's 4:30, but it's really not. It's probably 11:30 or whatever, right? So, anyway.
Whereas I wake up every 2 hours.
I am going to put the pits on the ground and then I'll clean them up afterwards. So anyway, are you going to talk about the birds?
Let me see, what was on the agenda? We actually really didn't do full justice to Hart and the birds and the who. We talked about the who time earlier. On session earlier than yesterday. The Hart thing, like I was kind of taking the publishers or the ghostwriter to task for, I don't know who put the cover there for kind of emphasizing the looks. As I said, and I'm not making it up, I liked Hart before I ever knew what the singer and the rhythm guitar player looked like. So I liked the sound. There were a few revelations, like I knew from the Hart Greatest Hits album that we own. It's either Pauline's or mine, or probably better to look at it for both of them.
You got it.
Okay. The first album is so much better. Now that's the stuff I raised myself on. It's the 70s stuff. And the 80s stuff, I mean the singing's great, but there's some problems with the compositions. No, some of them are Ann and Nancy Wilson compositions, but with a collaborator. And most of these collaborators, many of them were, sad to say, industry hacks. One of the ideas with rock and roll, particularly,
Well, the stuff's old.
it's sold, but will it last?
Yeah.
People still listen to the Beatles, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, I always wish that Ann Wilson would have had some material that was worthy of
Up
her
to snuff.
voice,
I
right?
mean,
Like,
yeah. So
his-
let's say Diane Warren writes a song for Cher. And Cher's got a pretty good voice. It's maybe more powerful than it is having range, but Ann Wilson has both. And so when Diane Warren writes one or two big hits for Hart, it's not going to exhaust the possibilities when it comes especially to range, combined with power. So, yeah, why do you do it? The other thing I found out, I thought it was their choice, Hart's choice, and really the core of the group. They weren't actually founding members, much less the founding members. They joined a group that already existed, a bunch of guys.
Interesting.
But they ended up taking it over. It's amazing how many members there've been in the band. Let's say about 35.
Didn't know.
And yeah, so it's kind of been a treadmill for the guys. some of the guys ended up being trouble. And so guys will be guys. Not that that's an excuse, much less a reason. They, one of the things I liked about art in the 70s was how they used dynamics, especially going from acoustic guitar to electric guitar, and sometimes back again or whatever. A lot of different guitar textures, and they were forced to do that by the record company. Now, but really they were forced by economics because no one was buying that 70s acoustic electric guitar sound in the 80s. So they could have stuck to their guns, and not sold as much, but they would have been, at least to my ears, more endurable, more lasting if they'd done stuff like that. Apparently, Nancy Wilson actually prefers to play acoustic guitar. The people she styled herself on, according to the book, and I don't see why, the book's basically them and talking, Anne and Nancy Wilson, with the occasional interlude provided by one of their friends, acquaintances, or co-workers. Nancy Wilson wanted to do stuff like Simon and Garfunkel, and what else? Well, folky type of stuff from the 60s. Simon and Garfunkel seemed to stand out. They did harmonies. And one of the things that disappoints me is one of the highlights of the 50s was maybe Pete Townshend's favorite band or act from the 50s. It wasn't Elvis Presley, and it wasn't Chuck Berry, and it wasn't Jerry Lee Lewis. It was the Everly Brothers. And the Who did like to have harmonies in much of their stuff, however hard they might have been rocking and whatever. So the 50s had this sibling act. Blonde, brunette. The 60s had their sibling act. It was Simon and Garfunkel. Blonde, brunette. The 70s had their sibling. It was a sibling act. Simon and Garfunkel wasn't. They didn't get along. But of course, the Everly Brothers didn't get along either. There was a lot of animosity and enmity there. So the heart. And then the 80s, even though the group started in the 70s, had their fake sibling act. It was really funny because one of them was quite short, the other was quite tall. And the weird thing is, the guy who was tall was, I only realized later, he's considered the heartthrob. I thought he was kind of geeky looking. Well, I tend to find tall guys look kind of geeky. And the worst yet is like you get them on a sports field or whatever, and they're kind of geeky and clumsy. And there are exceptions. And in basketball, of course, you want at least one tall guy to do the slam dunks for you and stuff like that. And then go around like LeBron James. He's actually not the tallest. Talking about how he's the leader. You know, like my idea of a good basketball team is where you got 5 leaders and no followers. People who play team, work hard and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, it was Hall and Oates in the 80s. Do you remember them?
Oh, yeah.
She's a man-eater. She's a rich girl, but sometimes it sounded almost as though they were putting a B in front of the R. Anyway, they had a huge run of hits. It went back into the 80s, went into considerable part, or it went back to the 70s and went into a considerable part of the 80s. Never cared for them that much. I always preferred the guy who wrote, I think, most of the stuff. What was his name? John Oates. Daryl Hall, I think, was the tall blonde guy. He eventually grew sideburns, but I hated his look in the 70s. He looked like some sort of disco duck. And of course, that sold. That sort of stuff. Yeah, it's a similar sort of thing. Like, I'd never thought Epstein on Welcome Back Kotter was that particularly good looking, but I couldn't understand why women were going gaga over John Travolta. I thought he looked geeky, ugly, and stupid. And I think he was stupid, too.
I don't know. I never found him handsome, but I guess a lot of people did.
Yeah, it's
He did have nice hair, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
And some people like those eyes, but I think his eyes actually weren't that big. You know, they're kind of small but blue. Maybe they were
Yeah,
small.
the dark hair and blue eyes, though, that's always nice.
Well,
isn't it?
people find that attractive. You know, I think that's isn't that the Pierce Brosnan look, or does he have dark
I
hair?
have no idea.
Anyway,
He's very handsome.
yes, he is. George Clooney, for an Irish guy, is kind of like a small nose. I'm sure he's Irish, at least on his mom's side of the family. Clooney actually might be French name. Anyway, I think he's Irish.
So, why did he take his mom's name?
Well, I suspect it was one of those Hollywood marriages that didn't last long.
Oh,
He was with his mom. Who knows who she was married to? Yeah, she had one of the all-time novelty classics. Come on to my house, come on. Gonna give you candy or whatever. It's done in something like an accent. What was that?
I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah.
Well, what were we talking about?
Anyway, I was talking about how different eras, different decades actually had these sibling or quasi-sibling, pseudo-sibling acts. Blonde, dark hair. Now, I don't know the 90s that well. Was there something like that shaken in the 90s? Coming out of Seattle, you know? There was, you know.
You mean like Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love?
Yeah, well, that was two blondes. She was probably
What?
fake.
She was not blonde, though. Oh, I guess at that time, though, she was.
I think she was kind of bleaching or something
Yeah, I
like
think
that. I don't know what. She never struck me. I was just going to make a joke about her not being that natural. Anyway, he could have, you know, he was so blonde. If they'd matched him up with well, it could have been a dark-haired woman, the same act, or dark-haired guy, he might have been that much more saleable. Of course, he ended things before they could be very saleable, and the other thing is, well, he was writing the material, and I hope this doesn't come as a huge shock to people, but their material just wasn't that good. It wasn't
No,
that
I
bad.
have no idea. I don't know if there was a 90s comedy like
I can't think of one. I kind of picked up on some of that stuff.
that. I mean, there were the pseudo-sibling acts, like the White Stripes and stuff like that, right? But
Yeah,
it wasn't the dark hair, light hair combination.
yeah, that one's good. They should have tried that, you know. They might have stuck together. But I think that was a pseudo-sibling act. I
Yeah,
think they were
I think they were a
married,
couple,
and
yeah.
then they split up and tried to keep it going together. And I guess, I almost said Jack Black, but whatever his name is, Jack White. Yeah, that's weird, Jack White, Jack Black. That's why it mix them up. I think he realized basically he could play drums better than her, so all he had to do was do the Billy Corgan thing. There was one album apparently where Billy Corgan did it, you know, the guy with the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Did pretty well everything.
Oh, really?
Maybe even the song, maybe even the vocals, and of course writing
Oh,
the
well,
stuff.
that's unfortunate.
Well, I mean, you can imagine what it's like.
I guess a lot of people like that.
Yeah. What he'd do is he'd tell the people in the group, you know, cheesy sometimes works. You can imagine what they'd be like. I wish more people from that Seattle/grunge era had followed his advice. Of course, you know, to do cheesy, you kind of got to have some vocal cords or whatever.
I don't know. We were talking about the B-52s and how.
Well, they're about the, well, you know, I get. No, they're the. One was a redhead, one was a
Well, I don't know what their natural
blonde.
hair color
Yeah.
is.
Anyway, that could have been seen as a sibling act or something like that.
No,
They're maybe
I
the
don't
only.
think that.
They actually came from the late '70s though,
Yeah.
and then they were hit in the
But
'80s.
no, I'm saying with the corniness. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like humor involved. We were talking about with
Well,
the women have the lovely voices, and then you have like
the beehive hairdos.
a humorous voice, and every
Oh,
person.
the
That's a good
guy singer.
combination.
They, we were talking about that other day in the car. And they
Yeah.
did way too many vocals.
Well,
Uh,
James thinks so.
Well,
I like.
I
I
like
think.
the humor. Like the, we belong to the Dead Beat Club, and then he goes and Deadpan Dead Beat Club. Yeah, I'm willing to put up with that, but I don't want to hear him do. You were saying what did he do?
Love
Did
Shack.
he Love Shack? Well, yeah, that one's kind of funny.
It is. It's great.
But the lyrics have to carry you along, and the women are providing some interesting vocalizations and stuff. Yeah, where is what is it, a groovy little place or something like that? Where we can get together.
Mhm.
A little euphemism there. Never hurt anybody. Oh man,
Yeah.
those were the days.
Hmm.
Didn't like '80s music much, but when I heard that stuff off the Big Hit album, the one that has Rome and Deadbeat Club, I knew there was something going on. But they were started off in the '70s. How do I know? Just before John Lennon died, they were close to his favorite group. He died in 1980.
Yeah, I had that record with Rock Lobster, and I
Yeah.
was very happy that I was able to get it.
Hmm.
Bought it from a record shop
Okay.
when I was
Yeah.
14 or 15.
Yeah. Anyway, what else was in that book? So I didn't realize that they'd been forced, as it were, more by economic conditions, I suppose, because at least one of them was running a cocaine habit.
Oh,
Yeah, and apparently
yeah.
a
Well,
pretty serious
twas
one.
the time.
And
for
you know
that,
which
wasn't
one
it?
that would be, right? The one that just had trouble with her appetites generally. Anyway, she survived that stuff, and long may she sing. Um, the book was put out in 2012. I gathered that since then they've had bouts of splitting. Actually, I hadn't realized. Nancy Wilson I don't know if she officially quit the group, but she didn't record with them and tour with them, I guess, from 1995 to 2002. That's 7 years. That's pretty extensive hiatus.
Yeah.
And since then, they've been kind of on the outs with each other.
Oh, that's too
I've
bad.
seen how that could happen with the Everly Brothers. The Kinks, Dave and Ray Davies. Apparently, there were fisticuffs involved in that. And I've seen it with one, maybe two of my siblings. Um, and I've tended to be the lightning rod for both of them. I don't know. Of course, that developed quite late in my life, whereas the Kinks were pounding on each other, I guess, when they were in their 20s, maybe in their early 20s. I can't remember too much else from the book. If you like art, it's well worth reading. I like the fact that it's basically quotations from Anna and Nancy Wilson. It's not mediated by rock critics.
Yeah, boy, that Rolling Stones person that was on that Birds album.
Pauline did the segue for me.
It
Yeah,
was
so
bad.
now I'm leading up to the birds thing. Now, the birds thing is an amazing sort of.
I mean, you'd think that Rolling Stones would hire people who actually have some sense.
Rolling Stone magazine.
Yeah,
Is that
because,
correct?
I mean, they're big, right?
They're huge. So this guy is,
How
as I
did he
recall,
get
his
in?
name is Anthony DeCurtis. Well, they never wear that. Rock critics were never that good at stuff. Now, on those two DVDs, and
They're full.
harmonic and full length.
Yeah. It's amazing how much material they put into talking about the birds.
So there wasn't that much in that I didn't know about, because their last album was 1971, and I bought a book way back when in the 70s when I was a kid and could hardly afford to buy any books, by Bud Scopa, who was a rock critic, and he actually did the job. He wrote a pretty good summary. I think it might have been published 73, so the group was basically Kerr Putt by then. It might have been 72, whenever. Bud, I'm sorry if I get this a little bit wrong. I'm going from memory here. But what I'm saying, Bud, is you did the job on the, went through personnel changes, so I knew, what was happening, all this sort of stuff. But I got to see, instead of that, like there was one guy who played bass for them near the end of their tenure together, and or career together, called Skip Batten. And that guy's amazing. I think I've seen one still picture of him that doesn't make him look like a younger, hairier brother of Fester on the Addams Family. Like
nice.
weird black eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But then I saw him live, and he looked alive and all that sort of stuff, young and alive. I don't know what's going on there. So that was a revelation. And I got to see, I'd read in Bud Scopa's thing about this weird string bender that a guy who was with the Birds for quite a while called...
Yeah, that was cool to learn about,
what's
hey?
his name? White?
Or I guess you already knew about it, but I didn't.
Well, I knew about the concept, but I didn't know what it was.
Oh.
So it was the guitar strap. When he pulled down on the guitar, the strap would bend the strings. And I guess you do that with a tremolo bar, but the trouble with a tremolo bar is you can be fretting, but it's hard to play stuff. You're kind of pressing down with the tremolo bar. This thing, you could be playing, and all you'd have to do is like pull down with your fretting hand and stuff like that. So a whole lot of bending going on. What was the guy's name? Gene White or something like that?
That guy's a genius.
Yeah, he's a great guitar player. The thing I know, they were noticing, they missed stuff, like they were pointing out, isn't that weird that the Birds, they weren't that good in the studio at the end, but boy, were they so much better on the stage. I mean, yeah, Roger McGuinn got what he wanted. He didn't want competition like David Crosby or Gene Clark or even Chris Hillman when it came to the writing sort of thing. So he ends up writing, with Jacques Levy or whatever his name was, Chestnut Mare, so on and so forth. That's the problem with the latter-day stuff. And when I say latter-day, that means starting with even when he's working with Graham Parsons. Graham Parsons did not have a great voice. He had a country and western solo voice, which is a typical sort of thing. How are you going to sing harmony with Johnny Cash? Someone tried. A guy called Bob Dylan. It's one of the worst things Bob Dylan ever recorded. Possibly Johnny Cash ever recorded. They were singing, I think, Girl from the North Country. And one of the things about you sung harmony, right? You'd better have a sense of beat and where people are going to come in on the beat, right? Someone's that you're singing with comes behind the beat on a particular phrase or something like that. You better be behind the beat, or you're not getting the harmony effect. You're just getting it's like noise, right? It's stuff like that. Someone's coming in before the beat, you better come in before the beat. And that's why, like groups like the Mamas and the Papas, when they started falling apart and weren't practicing together enough, some of the worst things I've ever heard have been put out by them when they were trying to keep things together in the late 60s and stuff like that. That's why so often good harmony pairings, or I suppose even groups, are siblings, because they've grown up singing together. Simon and Garfunkel were awesome harmony group. Why? They actually had a little hit of their own called, when they weren't even Simon and Garfunkel officially, called Tom and Jerry, as in the
Cat and mouse.
cartoon thing, yeah, the cat and mouse cartoon. And of course, Tom would have been Garfunkel, who was apparently not easy to get along with. Of course, apparently Paul Simon wasn't either. And maybe they were made for each other, made to break each other's hearts or whatever. Break their fans' hearts, really. Um, but yeah, like a lot of people, I hope, think like me and go, what happened to Simon and Garfunkel? You know, like Garfunkel had no talent, really, aside from the ability to sing and harmonize, not just sing, solo type of stuff, but harmonize. And what happened to Paul Simon? You know, like he got some guys like the Dixie Hummingbirds to sing with him. Won't you take me to a Mardi Gras? They do a great job, but he tended to opt for kind of like solo voice things. And this isn't a revelation to Pauline. Hopefully, it isn't a revelation to anyone. Paul Simon has a weak voice, correct?
Mm-hmm.
He hits the notes. But no, I've got to give him credit. Apparently, in the 70s, he tried taking singing lessons. How many rock and roll or pop people would have actually taken singing lessons? Didn't seem to have done him any good. But, you know, like sometimes you got to stick together. Like, you know, like in a family, once there's kids involved, so long as someone isn't abusive, particularly physically abusive, people should hang together for the family. And Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, if you're still alive, I hope you are. You guys should have stuck together for the family, because the family was your fans, like me. And Paul Simon, you never did or rarely did anything like what you did on the last 4 Simon and Garfunkel albums. The first one, I don't think they had much control over the material. You know, there's a Bob Dylan cover, which is worse than, it's not a very good song. It's called The Times They Are Changing. It's actually worse than Bob Dylan's version. Yeah, they're singing harmony, but that doesn't seem the point in the song. They were doing horrible folk type classics like Go Tell It on the Mountain, Over the Hills and Everywhere. And they do horrible versions of this stuff too. It seems as though they couldn't care less. The best stuff on that is written by Paul Simon, and it shouldn't be that way. And if you're like just starting off, like Rookies, I think it was put out initially '64, something like that. So he did one called Bleecker Street, and that one actually has some lines in it that are, you know, not kind of like poetry. They are poetry. Oh, Bleecker Street. So he was actually better than Bob Dylan at that point in time. And Bob Dylan eventually surpassed him, and Paul Simon never caught up to him. He did one thing that was maybe more intensely poetic. And what I mean by intensely is having more thrills per unit word or something like that, called A Dangling Conversation. It's too poetic, I think. They released it in 1966 or thereabouts, and it just went kerplunk. You know, it just died the death. People didn't want to hear that much poetry. They were willing to listen to like a Rolling Stone, but not Dangling Conversation.